Hello again, and thank you for taking a moment with Mel. As you can see, I am in my pink, and I couldn't let Women's History Month close out without acknowledging the amazing humans that have been bestowed the ability to not only incubate but also bring forth life into this world. Today, we are going to be talking about how historic women are. Now, for the purposes of our discussion, we are going to define historic as great and having lasting importance. If you want to hear my full thoughts on the matter, you can follow the link in the bio and you'll get to my blog. Never let the honor and privilege bestowed upon you by God be minimized. You are not a baby mama. You are a mother of our future. I need you to walk in that power and I need you to walk in that purpose. The intent of this post is not to make anyone feel blamed or shamed, but for just to remind us of how historic we are and also about how important not only that gestational period when the babies are in our stomach, but also how important those first couple of years of life are. In my book, 51 Revolutions to Me, I have a poem in the book. The title of the poem is Overground Railroad. And it talks about us creating a railroad of knowledge. The reason that we are creating the railroad of knowledge is to take us from one state of being to the next level. In that poem, it has a quote by Nelson Mandela. That quote by Nelson Mandela talks about our ability to use education. It says that education is the most powerful weapon that we can use to change the world. Now, you know I'm a reader. I've been reading a book lately. The name of the book is Scattered Minds. The author of the book is Dr. Gabor Mate. He is a family physician and he is also a world-renowned expert on addiction and then also ADHD. So if you have a loved one that is suffering from either one of those conditions, you would be able to get that book, whether you want to read it, whether you want to listen to it. It's a must-have if you have anybody in your life, your loved ones, that are either struggling with either one of those things. Now, Dr. Mate was born in January 1944 in Budapest, Hungary. He was born 2.5 months before the German occupation of his city. Now, 2 days after the occupation of his city, his mom called the pediatrician and she said to the pediatrician, I need you to come because Gabor will not stop crying. And the pediatrician said, I'll come if you want me to come, but all of my Jewish babies are crying. So we're talking about all of the babies in that city, different households, different mothers that love them immensely, but because of the anxiety, because of the stress, because of the fear that the mothers were under, unconsciously, the babies were noticing the difference in their moms, and it was causing them to have, actually, research shows, and he says it in his book, that anxiety stress level, it changes the biological makeup of the brain, the chemical makeup of the brain. So those are the things that, whether you love your children or not, there are times when things unfold in our lives that cause us to be anxious, cause us to have fear, and our children are unconsciously taking those things in. And remember, we're talking about our gestational period when we're pregnant, and we're also talking about those first couple of years of life. Dr. Mate has a wonderful interview that he did with Mel Robbins. If you have listened to her podcast, or if you want to go on YouTube, you can find it. So if you want to hear a little bit from him, Mel Robbins Podcast, or you can access it on YouTube. Now, another thing that I've been listening to, well, I listen to sermons a lot. And I was listening to the sermon, and then when I was putting this together, I realized that, wait a minute, these two things kind of go together. So I was listening to a sermon by Sarah Jakes Roberts. The title of it is Fill the Gap. And in it, she talks about us doing the right thing wrong. Us believing with all our might that we are doing the right thing, but it ends up being the wrong thing over time, and we realize it on the back end that some of what we're doing is the wrong thing, even though we thought that we were doing it right. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, how does all of this come together? So, for an example, as immigrants, as first generation people out of poverty, we want to provide our children with a lot of the physical things that we didn't have. Because we suffered so much, and because we know that we now have opportunities, we want to maximize those opportunities. And sometimes what happens is it takes away from the time that we need to spend with our children, and it takes away that time at very critical points in their development. A lot of times we have this mentality and we say, all right, I'm going to hustle hard when they're young, so that when they get older, I can spend more time with them. And that's what a lot of immigrant families do, and that's what sometimes happens, especially if we are the first generation out of poverty and we have the degrees and we have the great jobs. We want to make sure that we dedicate our time to those things so that we can take care of our kids. But I want us to remember that not only is it important for us to take care of our children's physical needs, but it is also equally, they're the same, equal, 50-50. We also have to take care of our children's emotional needs. So when we think about the importance of women, we think about how historic we are, we think about Dr. Mate's research and what we're seeing even unfolding in our society, where we have our children that are more anxious and they're having more behavioral health concerns than we did when we were younger. We're realizing, and if we put the research together, we have to go back to honoring that time of gestation when our babies are in our stomach, and then also those first couple of years, because what's happening is we're seeing that their brain chemistry, their development of all of their brain development is being impacted by some of the things, some of the situations that we are putting them in that we don't even know that we're putting them in. We have to do everything in our power to be the most consistent caregiver and nurturer that we can be. Because if we can do that, especially in those first couple of years, we set our children up for success. If we don't do it, and what we are seeing now playing itself out in society is the fact that during those periods of time, no judgment, we were doing the right thing wrong. We have our children that are dealing with more things from an emotional standpoint than we were, and we can go back to some of the things that used to be done, and with the knowledge that we have, we can make some impact not only on this generation, but generations to come. As a woman, we have to create those spaces, those environments where we are those nurturing caregivers. Sometimes we're gonna have to block things out. If you are the partner, you have to participate in creating that nurturing environment. If the mother is the primary caregiver, you gotta help out more, because that primary caregiver is the one, even though you are important, that primary caregiver is the one that the child is more attuned to, more attached to. So it is very, very, very important that both of you create that right environment. Whether you're together or not, You could be separated, you could be divorced, you could be co-parent, whatever the situation is, it is to your benefit to help to create that environment. If you have a young mom, if you have a teenage mom, any woman in your life, let's put it that way, any woman in your life that is a mom, and you know that they're struggling, they don't have the support system that they need to have, those of us that have some time, we have to step in. We have to go back to creating that village mentality, because if we don't create that village mentality, again, some people do have it, but if we don't do that more, we are going to have more and more of society's problems that we see on the news, that we see on the internet. That's why we're seeing some of these things unfold. We have an opportunity and we have to seize this opportunity. If we get together and make this time a priority for our mothers to be, and then also in those first couple of years that the babies come into this world, we will impact every medical condition, every addiction, every behavioral health condition. So thanks again to all the historic women that brought us here, and thanks in advance to the historic women to come, the ones that we will use the Overground Railroad to not only educate but support. Happy Women's History Month!